The 21st century belongs to India. She has already made major strides in many challenging technical areas like software, nuclear, space, and supercomputer technologies. Yet why is India not a world leader in innovations and new products? How can she get to be one? How can she create an ecology to make that possible? Explore the answers to these questions in the forthcoming book, Innovation by India, for India. Innovation by India, for India. A book by the acclaimed researcher.
Okay, this is a bragging about me. I'll stop that. Okay, the book, what happened was this, okay? The book is dedicated to Dr. Abdul Kalam. I was at Anna University and suddenly some gentleman walks in after my talk and says, Dr. Kalam is here. He would like to meet with you if you have the time. I mean, which was rather stupid, okay? I mean, to meet with him was a great honor, so I really grabbed it. And I tell you, it's a very interesting meeting. You know, I go to this person's room, I go through 2 layers of security, everything. And typically in the US, okay, you walk into somebody's office like him, there'll be hundreds of plaques hanging, how big they are, showing. There was nothing there. There was just a sign saying P.A.J. Abdul Kalam, not even a PhD or a doctor after his name. There was a picture of Gandhi with his walking stick right in front of him, and a very nice repro of a Ravi Verma painting behind him. He moved everything away that was cluttered on his desk, and for about 50 minutes we were talking one-on-one. It was amazing, okay? I mean, nobody, okay, walking into the office of such a great man. And so we got to talking, and then I had the courage. That's when the India 2020 book had come. I don't know how many of you have read it. Basically, he was saying India will become developed by India 2020, by 2020. So I was challenging him on that book, telling him, look, what you people have done in this book is to really list all the resources that India has in terms of materials, in terms of various mines and blah, 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 other things. But we don't have an ecology, okay, for development. How will this happen? So we had a lot of discussion for 50 minutes, at the end of which he told me, look, you seem to have some ideas, so why don't you put it down in writing, share it with the world? Okay, that's what people like us need to do. And I myself have been very frustrated in the sense that every day I read the Indian newspapers, okay, Indian Express particularly. There are so many articles complaining about so many things in India, everything from education, industry, finance, politics, you name it. How many of these have even 2 sentences giving a recommendation for change? Okay? We can all complain. That comes for cheap, okay? So I said, look, I'm going to take on the topic that's dear to me, to heart, innovations, okay, and inventions. And let me write a book that talks about it with an Indian context. In fact, what happened was later, when I'd finished the manuscript, one of my friends who knew Professor Rajaraman, you know, the supercomputers at the Institute of Science, he told me I'll ask Rajaraman whether he will read it and comment. And he initially said, I don't have time for all these things, okay? Then he said, okay, have him send me the list of chapters. That was sent to him, and he got very excited and he has even written a review of that in one of the magazines. And when I met him, the first thing he asked me was, how long did it take you to write this book? So I told him 2 full years, if you count all the research that has gone into it. And he told me, why would a serious researcher like you waste 2 years of your life on something like this? And I thought he was, not happy about the book. What he said was, the conditions here are not right. It is fantastic ideas, and I'm going to write a review about it, but on the other hand, I think you wasted your time. I don't personally think I wasted my time, okay? One of the things I did was, after the book was published, about 300 free copies have been sent out to major academic institution heads, to major decision makers in government, to various ministries and so on. And I already see a lot of things that are mentioned in the book being implemented. Okay? They don't make any acknowledgement to it, but that's how politics works. I mean, the idea of my writing this book was to pay something back to India, not to be garlanded. And in fact, there are 2 articles in Indian Express, those of you who can go look at it, about innovations by some politicians. There are whole sentences, paragraphs picked from the book, and you will see that replicated in the articles, okay? I personally don't care about that. The real fact is, yes, things are moving. I'm very happy I have not wasted my time. What is this book about? Let me talk about it very quickly. Here are the chapters, okay? In chapter 1, I talk about what is the dire need. Why should India innovate at all? Okay? Everybody's happy. We have a large middle class now. We are the software kings of the world, right? What software kings? Have we made a Google? Have we created an Amazon? Have we created an Adobe? What are we doing, okay? Ask yourself. Second chapter, what I do is I look at all the factors that either help innovation or are against it. Okay, I will talk about each one, okay, very quickly. In the third chapter, beginning the third chapter, I take each factor group, take a snapshot of where India is, and conclude the chapter with a list of what things can be done to change it. Okay? The very last chapter is a very short chapter for the individual innovator. What are the things they should watch for, what they should do. Okay, because what is more important is that we create an ecosystem, okay, where the individual innovator can create a lot of things. If my company had not given me the freedom to work the way I did, to pick the right problems, and the resources to get all the information I need to solve it, etc., there's no way I could have solved that example that I told you, right? Do we have such an ecosystem here? We don't, unfortunately, today. So what can be done? That's what the book is all about. Now, each of you have the power of the vote, okay? At the end of the day, we live in a democracy. So don't say I'm powerless, the government has to do it. No, that's not true. Each one of us has a lot of power, okay? So I hope someday you'll read books of this type and see how you can contribute. I want to make a big distinction between research and innovation, okay? Research is something where you chase knowledge for its own sake. Okay, so for example, this is like somebody asking Hillary, why did you climb Everest? And he answered, because it is there. Okay? Research is of that type. Why did you prove this theorem? If you ask, well, I'm interested in mathematics, that's my life, that thrills me, I do it. Okay, it's knowledge for its own sake. Where I differentiate innovation is it's very purposeful research. Okay, you want to invent something new to solve a specific problem, and a lot of times to use that for commercial purposes too. All right? So I hope everybody gets the distinction between research and innovation. Innovation is very rarely supported in India. Look at the Infosys prize, okay? Who does it go to? You do a big theorem in number theory, you'll probably get it. Okay, you do a great research in some new algorithm, you'll be unknown for them, okay? We still have an old mindset. When I talk about innovation doesn't have to be high-tech or anything, okay? There's a real problem, can we solve it? That's the bottom line. Here is an example, okay? Yeah. Is everybody Tamil speaking here? Madulambaram, okay? Right? Pomegranate. It's a pain to take the seeds out, right? That piece of plastic, it has no screws, nothing electrical, nothing electronic, it's just a plastic mold. You just cut it in half, put a few scores, put that on top, heat it with something, and out come all the seeds. I took these pictures at home. Okay, a product like this, every year, especially during Christmas, you turn on to Home Service Network or one QVC, one of these channels, you will see hundreds and hundreds of these new products introduced in the US. And they sell in hundreds of thousands, making people extremely rich. Do we invent anything? When I used to talk in engineering colleges, I used to challenge the students. Water is a big problem here, okay, everywhere. Has the bucket pump we use, has it changed since the time I was a 4-year-old kid when I could recognize a bucket pump? It's the same bucket pump we are using, right? Has anybody thought of putting a force multiplier or something in that to make the job easy? Why can't we do that? See, even in big places like IITs and IASC, the big deal is to publish a paper in an American journal, even if it is a very third-rate paper. Okay? That's not the end of the world. We need to use our education to do something of value, okay? And it doesn't have to be high-tech. Why do we have to be, what is the need for a innovation ecology? First is, if we want to be a developed nation, we have to innovate, okay? If you don't innovate, if you don't own the products you make, sell them to others, you're not going to make a lot of money. I told you in the previous talk, working for somebody you don't get rich. All our IT guys, they are modern day slaves, okay? Think about it. All right, here you take a bright guy who has gone through a lot of trouble to get into IIT, gets an MTech, and he's sitting there writing Python code day in, day out for 10, 12 hours a day for a multinational corporation. Is that what life is all about? Right? So we need to own things. In fact, one of the things I talk about in the book is, for our freedom fighters, okay, people like Gandhi, Nehru and all, what was the problem? India had a lot of raw material, okay, a lot of cotton, a lot of steel, other things. What happened? They all got shipped to England. They made the things, and the things got sold in India. We got poorer decade after decades, and Britain got extremely rich. We are doing the same thing with humans today in India. We are educating them, making them big. Look at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. What is the big brag that they say? Our graduates are hired by Goldman Sachs at so many $100,000 per year. Here is the Indian taxpayer spending money to educate this bright man in the Indian Institute of Management. For what? See, this is where I take issues with people like Amartya Sen, okay? Amartya Sen talks about what he calls as what is this? What? Yeah, first children or something, okay? You need first children for any nation, okay, to develop. But you cannot create first children and leave them for adoption to some other land. You never move up. All right? Power projection as a nation. See, today, nations don't conquer with an army and all like they used to in the old days. The weapons they use are cyber warfare at the very lowest end. At the high end, patents and other things, you try to do something new, some big company will sue the hell out of you. You can't do anything. You can't compete with them. I told the third bullet already. Swadeshi, I mentioned. We cannot just have political independence. We need economic independence, okay? That comes only if we make our own new products, our own big companies like Google or Amazon or whatever, and make a lot, all right? The final one. There's a beautiful example in a book of Cohen. By the way, my book has a lot of references. He talks of an interesting real story. When the Kargil war took place, our Indian soldiers were using hand-cranked mobile phones. I don't know if any of you have seen them. Whereas the Pakistani guys were using latest, at that time, Motorola wireless phones. And worse still, the software for that Motorola phone was written in Bangalore by Indian engineers. Okay? So do you see how national security is impacted by whether we innovate or not? Almost every electronic device you use, the chips are made somewhere outside. You have no idea what else the firmware has, how much data is being stolen, what it's used for. Okay, it's extremely, especially in this information age, it is exceptionally important for a nation like India, if it has to remain truly free and compete, become developed, that we need to develop an innovation ecology. All right? Factors impacting innovation, what are they? Okay, quickly, let me see how much. I'll see the time very well here. 15 minutes ago. Okay. See, the first one is society and culture. Okay, we are a people who look up to government for everything. Number one, we have a very hierarchical society. Okay, for a little thing, you need to have the head of the institution approve it. Otherwise, nothing happens. You know, so the empowerment of people at all levels, that makes a big difference. Attitudes towards wealth, okay? How do you think about a rich person? Is every rich person bad? What's wrong in making money, right? Even to do good things, one needs money. So if you have any wealth aversion, you know, it's time to get rid of it, because there are only two things that matter with regard to wealth. How you earn it. Do you earn it honestly? Second, how do you spend it? If I'm going to make money to buy a 600,000 Ferrari or something, that's ridiculous, okay? But I don't have to view every rich person as an enemy or think of being rich as bad. The second thing is, richer than your neighbor is not the key, okay? Am I rich enough to do a lot of good things, okay? So, you know, you shouldn't set unnecessary limits to yourself. Our culture is definitely very different if you think about it. Okay, gender gap, okay, if you look at status of women here in terms of empowerment, even in developed nations, only about 5 to 6% of the patents are held by women. Now, if you take half of humanity and doesn't empower them, how do you move forward? You're really underutilizing or not utilizing an exceptionally large resource that you have, which is probably as good as men, right? I'm talking to all the younger people here. When you get married, you know, please think about this. Your wife can do a lot more than just cooking and cleaning. Okay, she might be as bright as you are, could contribute in multitudes of ways. Okay? Personal traits, I talked about soft skills, IP protection. See, here people are even afraid to file for a patent because you don't know if somebody in the patent office will leak it to somebody else. Right? Corruption, it plays a big role. So these are the big things, and what I do is I take stock of all these in the next many chapters, and for each chapter ends with specific recommendations, okay, on what the government can do, what educational institutions can do, and so on. Since I don't have much time, let me just touch on some of the larger issues, okay? Coming to education. One of my main points is this. Our education system, okay, was given by the British. They had only one goal, okay? They wanted very obedient servants who could work for them. They didn't want masters of themselves, okay? We haven't changed that education a little bit. We need a totally revamped education policy. By the 8th class, a person who gets out of school should be able to balance a checkbook, should be able to use a smartphone, should be able to access the internet for information, all that. If you don't empower them that way, how are they going to be good? Even today, you know, a vendor on the street has to be computer smart to some extent, right? What are we teaching them? We are still teaching them the old-fashioned way. English, Tamil, mathematics, right? So, one of the things I say is that in the initial part of the education, you need to have emphasis on functional aspects where they personally experience, explore, learn, become ready for life, and not be very subject oriented. The second thing I say is, after that, we are all different, okay? There is nothing like one shoe fits all. Everybody in the class gets the same courses, same exams, same thing. But are we all the same? We are not, right, as human beings. So at some point, at least say, let's say in high school, we should be channeled into things based on our aptitudes and our abilities. We should know a little bit about every field, but the specialization has to be tailored to the student. If US excels a lot, it's because of that customization. And it's very possible here. I don't see, one nice thing that has happened is, I don't know how many of you have looked at the new education policy draft of the Indian government. They talk about these things. There are sentences from the book that I see there, exactly verbatim, okay? That's why I feel that, yes, the book has had a real impact. Another thing I say is, I may offend some of you in this hall, but please bear with me. I am totally against the notion of reservations, okay? Of seats, jobs, everything. I'll tell you why. Can you afford to have a doctor who doesn't know what he or she is doing? You would like to go to a doctor who knows the best, right? Who is very capable. Would you like our bridges to be built by engineers who are not capable? So merit has a certain place. See, if you don't have merit as the number one thing, then in society what happens is the very rich people, because they can afford to pay, they will get the best services because they can pay for that. And it is a poor guy who still gets the brunt of it, right? So if the goal is to help the poor and the disadvantaged, which a democratic society must necessarily do, all right? I don't think anybody should suffer any kind of a discrimination because of the family they were born into, or the religion, or caste, or anything. I totally agree. Otherwise, we don't have, it goes counter to the notion of democracy. But how do you make that? You make people competent to compete effectively in a merit system. So one of the recommendations I'd made there was, I look at my grandchildren, okay, the toys they play with, the documentaries they see, the places they visit, they're all educational. And if you compare them, even in the US, to a poorer child, the difference is so vast. I don't see how the poor child can compete with these kids, okay? So what we need to do is, in poor areas, don't give them money, okay? Set up childcare centers, create an environment which is very similar to what an upper middle class child will experience, at least during the day. And you'll see that in our new education policy, this has been adopted. They want to have changed the Anganwadis, or whatever they call it, These days for everything they have a Hindi term. Okay? And they have implemented this. The second recommendation I made, for example, is teachers, okay? I mean, a place like an IIT or an IIM is a national resource, okay? I used to be a lecturer in Loyola. There used to be visiting professors giving fancy talks in IIT, math science, and places like that. But we never used to even get a formal announcement saying that this talk is taking place. So to one of the directors, I had said, look, it'll be really nice if you people could at least let us know that such and such a talk is taking place, because some of us would like to come. I was told, Mr. Ramaswami, the mountain never goes to the Muhammad has to go to the mountain. Okay? We as a people are territorial, okay? Here is the taxpayer paying those institutions, right? They should be a resource for the whole nation. They cannot be territorial and say, this is just for us. So if you want changes to happen, we want them to focus more on at least educating teachers in other places which are need to be developed, so that they in turn can develop other teachers, and there can be a geometric progression in the way things grow. Again, this is an idea which you will see has been adopted in the education policy. I don't know whether they'll get implemented or not. At least on paper, they seem to have accepted some of these ideas. Okay, there are quite a few ideas of this type, okay? Another one I have said is, there is hardly any industry research in India worth talking about. Everybody wants to make their profit tomorrow, okay? Nobody is willing to invent, wait for 2 years or 3 years to get the money. That won't change unless the government intervenes. Look at Infosys. What research happens in Infosys? Infosys profits are very high. Mr. Narayan Murthy goes to Indian Institute of Science, curses every faculty member. You know, there was a big news, right? But what has he done for research or innovation? Ask yourself. So what I propose to the government is, put in 2 or 3% of their revenues as an innovation tax. Okay, let that money go to a common pool, managed by a set of scientists and technologists, to be given out on a competitive basis for proposals for people who have a good idea and are willing to work. And if Infosys, for example, has done some research of their own, have come up with some new products, give them a tax holiday for a year or 2 based on the size of that investment. Okay, that is a creative policy, right? CSIR, you look at CSIR, what do they do? Are we joking today? In this country, there are so many people who suffer from autoimmune diseases. Some of those infusions cost like $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Unaffordable even in the United States. What we need are things like biosimilars, at least, for people who suffer from diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis, or a whole list of them, all right? These labs should be working on those things. If you look at the US talks about trade with other countries, but the US standards are different from international standards. We have 110 volts, not 220. We put the switch up to turn it on, down to turn it off. Everything's ulta, okay? Why? Because they want to protect their markets. So the government should use the standards organization to the benefit of its people. It should use this research institute. A lot of research happens in places like National Institute of Health, National Institute of Standards in the US, and they get transferred free to industry. How much does CSIR, what company has CSIR helped to create in this country, right? So the whole mindset has to change, okay? We cannot just sit here in a vacuum, say we'll educate these people, ship them to the US to work for $60 an hour. No, that's not going to make you developed. Okay? I hope I motivated you to look at the book, all right? You are the younger generation. You can change this country. You can put it on a... Okay, I need to stop, okay? But I hope I've given you enough fodder to think, enough fodder to get your blood pressure high, okay? Please look at the book. I'm not trying to sell the book. As I said, 300 copies have been given out at cost. I'm going to make available as many copies as you need to Loyola. Any money that's collected will go to the college, not to me or to the publisher, okay?
Information.